The Curse of the Doll, The Haunting of the Warren Home. It had been a year since the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine, had brought the infamous Annabelle doll into their home. The doll had been locked away in their supernatural artifacts room, a special case designed to keep its evil contained. Though the Warrens had dealt with many dark entities in their time, none had been as persistent as Annabelle, whose very presence seemed to corrupt everything around her. But they thought they had contained her, for good. The Warrens' home was a place of peace for their daughter, Judy, who had grown accustomed to the strange occurrences that often surrounded her parents' work. Ed and Lorraine were no strangers to the supernatural world, and their daughter, though young, had developed an unusual resilience to it. Still, there was something about that cursed doll, the way its eyes followed you even when you weren't looking, that unsettled her more than anything else. But for Judy, life in the Warren household meant learning to live alongside the supernatural and the unexplained. It was a warm summer day when the most terrifying events began. Judy's babysitter, Mary Ellen, had arrived as usual. Mary Ellen, a kind young woman with an affinity for the paranormal, was aware of the Warrens' work, but she had never personally encountered anything as evil as Annabelle. She'd heard the stories, of course, the things the doll had done, the deaths and misfortunes it had caused in its wake, but she had always dismissed them as mere stories. After all, how could an inanimate object cause so much suffering? When Ed and Lorraine left for a case that afternoon, leaving Judy in Mary Ellen's care, the young woman felt a rare sense of relief. It had been a quiet week, with no strange disturbances or supernatural happenings, and she hoped the day would pass without incident. She had no idea that her life was about to be turned upside down. The first warning sign came when Mary Ellen was preparing dinner. A strange chill descended over the house and the lights began to flicker. It wasn't unusual for the Warrens' house to feel a little off, but this felt different, more oppressive, more intense. As she made her way through the hall, she felt a strange pull toward the room where the cursed artifacts were kept, including the glass case that housed Annabelle. "I shouldn't go in there," Mary Ellen muttered to herself, but her curiosity got the better of her. She had heard so much about the doll and the evil it contained, and she felt an urge to see it for herself. It was just for a moment, she told herself, a quick glance. The room was dark, lit only by the dim light from the hallway. The glass case was locked, but that didn't stop Mary Ellen from feeling a sense of dread the moment she stepped inside. She could feel the temperature drop. Her breath grew shallow and the hairs on her neck stood up. Annabelle sat in the corner of the case, her glassy eyes seeming to gleam in the darkness. The silence was deafening, but then a sudden noise broke it, a loud bang from upstairs. Mary Ellen jumped, startled, and immediately left the room, closing the door behind her. It wasn't until she was in the living room with Judy that she realized something was terribly wrong. The atmosphere in the house had changed. There was an unsettling stillness. The sense of unease only deepened when Judy, who had been playing in the corner, suddenly froze and stared at the door. Her little face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Judy?" Mary Ellen asked softly, but the girl didn't respond. Instead, she whispered, almost too quietly to hear, "She's awake." Suddenly, the lights flickered again, this time accompanied by the sound of a soft thudding coming from upstairs. The thudding grew louder, closer, like footsteps. Mary Ellen's heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea what was going on, but it was clear the supernatural forces at play in the house were not content to be ignored. "Stay close to me," Mary Ellen instructed Judy, her voice shaky as she tried to maintain control of the situation. But as soon as she turned to leave the living room, she heard it, a low guttural growl from somewhere above. The footsteps continued, followed by the sound of something, or someone, scraping against the floor, dragging itself through the house. It was as if the very walls of the house were alive, breathing in sync with the malevolent force that had taken hold of it. Mary Ellen's first instinct was to call Ed and Lorraine, but she couldn't find her phone. Panicked, she grabbed Judy and ran toward the front door, but as she reached for the handle, it slammed shut with a loud crash. The force of it nearly threw her to the ground. "Mom!" Judy cried, looking around in fear. "It's her." Annabelle! A cold, menacing laugh echoed through the house, but it wasn't Judy's voice. It was deeper, more sinister. Mary Ellen could barely move. The walls seemed to close in on her, the house now a prison, and the terrifying reality set in. The doll had done something to the house, and now it was using Judy as a conduit to reach the living. Just then, the house's power went out. The lights flickered and then died entirely. It was pitch black. Mary Ellen knew she couldn't wait for help. She needed to stop this herself. "I'm sorry, I didn't believe you," she whispered to Judy, who was holding her tight. Her eyes filled with fear, but also something else, an unspoken understanding. The girl knew that they needed to take action. With her heart racing, Mary Ellen led Judy to the attic, where Ed and Lorraine kept the cursed artifacts, hoping to find something to fight the evil that had taken hold. It was there, in the dark, cramped attic, that Mary Ellen saw something that made her blood run cold. The Annabelle doll was gone. The glass case that had once held it was shattered on the floor. The doll was no longer perched safely inside. And standing in the corner, in the shadows, was a figure. A woman dressed in white, her face obscured by the darkness. The woman stepped forward, and Mary Ellen saw her face, pale, hollow, with blackened eyes that seemed to pierce through her very soul. It was the spirit of the woman who had originally cursed Annabelle, and now she was free, using the doll as a vessel to wreak havoc on anyone who entered the house. "Get away from her!" Mary Ellen screamed, stepping between the spirit and Judy. But the spirit raised a hand, and the room seemed to quake. Objects from the shelves flew at them, and Mary Ellen stumbled back, feeling an icy grip around her throat. In that moment of terror, Judy reached out, touching the doll that had now appeared before them on the floor. As soon as she did, the spirit shrieked, but in that instant, a bright light filled the room, and the doll was pulled back into its cursed case, trapped once more. The room went silent. The spirit vanished, leaving nothing but a lingering chill in the air. Mary Ellen held Judy tightly, both of them trembling. It was over, for now. The Warrens arrived home to find their house in chaos, but Judy, despite everything she had just experienced, was safe. The doll was back in its case, and the darkness that had loomed over the house had lifted. Ed and Lorraine, though shaken by what had happened, knew that the doll would always be a threat, no matter how many times it was locked away. It was just another day in the life of the Warrens, but for Mary Ellen and Judy, it was a lesson in the true terror that lurked in the world, the curse of the Annabelle doll. I hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to comment and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll see you again with another creepy story. Until then, goodbye.